A man named Harold wrote me a letter, a real paper letter, and he said, "Levi, I have read about these so-called secret powders that you dump in the water and the fish go crazy, and I think they are nonsense. Prove me wrong or stop talking about them." So I am going to do exactly that. I am going to tell you the one garden aisle powder that genuinely pulls warm water fish in by scent alone. It costs about $2 a bag. I am going to show you the real Auburn University research on why it works. And then, Harold, I am going to tell you the honest limits of it, the places it does nothing, so that you can decide for yourself whether the old men were fools or whether the tackle counter just never had a reason to mention it. The powder is blood meal. Plain, dried blood meal, the kind sold as a nitrogen fertilizer in the garden aisle for $2 or $3 a bag. That is it. There is no mystery brand, no secret label. And the reason a fish responds to it is not magic, and it is not a gimmick. It is amino acids, and the science on this is some of the most solid science in all of fishing, which is exactly why you have probably never heard a tackle salesman say a word about a $2 bag of garden fertilizer. Let me walk you through what is actually happening in plain language. A fish does not smell the way you do. A fish tastes the water. It has chemical receptors in its nose and along its body, and in a catfish's case, all over its skin, that read dissolved compounds in the water at concentrations you cannot imagine, parts per billion. And the specific compounds that say food, that trigger an actual feeding response, that make a fish turn and hunt, are a small handful of amino acids. The big ones are glycine, alanine, and a compound called betaine. When a fish's receptors hit a cloud of those amino acids in the water, it does not think about it. It reacts, the way your mouth waters before you have decided to be hungry. It is wired in below thought. Now, what is blood meal? Blood meal is dried animal blood, and dried animal blood is one of the richest, cheapest sources of exactly those free amino acids on the planet. Glycine, alanine, the whole feeding trigger family, packed into a $2 bag meant for your tomatoes. When you put a small amount of it into the water in a controlled way, it dissolves into a scent cloud of the precise compounds a carp or a catfish is built to chase. You are not tricking the fish. You are speaking its native language with the cheapest possible dictionary. And this is documented. This is not me telling you stories. Auburn University has one of the oldest and most respected fisheries programs in the country, and their researchers have published study after study on amino acid feeding stimulants in warm water fish, identifying which amino acids trigger feeding and at what concentrations. The work is real, it is peer-reviewed, it is in the fisheries literature, and you can find it referenced through the Auburn Fisheries Program. The old pond men did not read those papers. They just knew that a little dried blood from butchering day, worked into a bait or dribbled at the edge of the pond, brought the catfish in. The scientists came along decades later and explained in careful language exactly why the thing the old men already did actually worked. I learned it from a fellow named Levi Esch, a tackle mender over by Intercourse. Sharpest hands I ever saw on a reel. Esch kept a little tin of dark powder in his tackle bag, and one slow afternoon when nothing was biting, he wet a bit of bread, rolled it in that powder, and put it out, and inside 20 minutes we had catfish where there had been nothing. I asked what was in the tin. He said, butcher's blood, dried. He said his father called it the caller, because it called the fish from the far bank. Esch told me the old families never wasted the blood from a slaughtered animal. They dried it, used some in the garden, and saved some for the pond, and that the same bag did both jobs. The pond and the garden, he said, want the same thing, And the thing they want is cheap, and most folks pour it down the drain. So why has it gone quiet, this $2 caller? Here is where it gets interesting, because this one actually does have a real regulation in its history. And I want to be precise with you because the careless version of this story is a lie. In 1997, the FDA put out a rule, the ruminant feed ban, in response to mad cow disease, restricting how animal-derived proteins, including blood products, could move through the feed supply chain. Now hear me clearly. That rule was about cattle feed and disease control. It said nothing, not one word, about fishing. Fishing was never the target. But the rule tightened up the whole cheap blood product supply chain. The price moved, the labeling changed, and the casual flow of cheap butcher's blood meal that pond men had used for generations got more complicated and more commercial. The knowledge did not get banned. It got inconvenient, and inconvenient knowledge fades, especially when there is a shelf full of $8 bottled scents standing right there, ready to replace it. The fishing application was collateral. It always is. Let me give you the 3 legal, sensible ways to use it, with real numbers, because dumping a bag of blood meal in a pond is both wasteful and the wrong way. And it is the kind of thing that can foul a small pond if you are careless. So listen. Method 1 is the bait paste. You take 2 tablespoons of blood meal and you mix it with enough flour and water to make a stiff dough. You mold a pinch of that dough onto your hook like a dough bait. The amino acids leach off it slowly right at your hook. A small, steady scent cloud exactly where your bait is. Cost? Pennies per hook. This is my confident catfish and carp rig in warm, stained water. Method 2 is the filter bag chum, and this is the controlled way to scent an area without fouling the water. You put a tablespoon of blood meal in a small mesh bag. A piece of pantyhose tied off works fine, the size of a tea bag, and you sink that bag near your bait on a separate line or weight. It releases a slow plume over an hour or 2 and draws fish into your spot without dumping loose powder everywhere. You pull the bag when you leave. Nothing left behind but the scent that is already washed out. Method 3 is the soak, for cut bait or for your dough. You dissolve a tablespoon of blood meal in 8 ounces of warm water, above 65 degrees so it dissolves clean, and you soak your cut bait or your bread or your corn in it for 10 minutes before you fish. The bait carries the scent on it. Simple, clean, no loose powder in the pond at all. 3 methods. $2 bag. A season's worth of scent for less than the cost of 1 bottle off the shelf. Now the honesty beat, Harold. This is the part for you especially. This does not work on base. I keep telling you that across these videos, and I am going to keep telling you because it is true, and because the men who sell you things will not. Largemouth and smallmouth bass are sight and motion predators. An amino acid scent cloud sitting in the water does very little to a bass, which wants to see something flee. Blood meal is a catfish, carp, and bullhead caller, a bottom feeder, warm water, scent hunter caller. Fish it for those and it shines. Fish it for bass and you will write Harold's letter yourself. It also does almost nothing in cold water. Below about 60 degrees, the whole amino acid response slows down with the fish's metabolism, and a scent cloud that pulls fish from the far bank in July does nothing in the high 40s of early spring. This is a warm season tool. 65 degrees and up is where it earns its keep. And you can absolutely overdo it. More is not better. A small pond does not need a cup of blood meal in it. That just clouds the water and robs the oxygen as it breaks down. And you can do real harm to a small pond that way. A tablespoon in a bag, a pinch in a paste, that is the dose. The fish reads parts per billion. You do not need to drown the pond to talk to it. You need to whisper, and a whisper is a tablespoon. And one more, the obvious one. Check your state, because a few states have specific rules about putting any attractant or chum in public water. And what is fine on your own private pond may not be fine at the public lake. That is on you to check with your state Fish and Wildlife Office before you do it. There was a man named Glenn, 64, out near Bedford, Indiana. Fished a farm pond he had permission on and could not buy a bite in the August heat. Water warm and the fish gone lockjaw. He tried the filter bag chum, 1 tablespoon, sunk near his usual spot. He wrote that within half an hour he had catfish moving through and took 4 good ones off a pond that had been dead to him all month. And here is the honest truth I gave Glenn. Those catfish were in that pond the whole August. They were not biting because in the warm, low-oxygen dog-day water they were holding tight and not hunting. The scent cloud did not bring fish from another county. It gave the fish that were already there, already half asleep, a reason to wake up and feed in a tight little zone right where Glenn's bait was. He did not buy fish. He woke up the ones he had. So why does a $2 bag of tomato fertilizer beat an $8 bottle of scent? Because the bottle is selling you a label and a clever name, and the bag is selling you the actual amino acids the fish is actually built to chase, with nothing in between. Levi Esch's father called it the caller 100 years before Auburn measured why it calls. The science did not discover anything the old men did not already use. It just finally explained it, right about the time the world quit listening. One last tweak, the one Esch kept for himself. When you make the paste or the soak, add a 1/4 teaspoon of plain table salt to the mix. The salt is not for flavor. It helps drive the amino acids out of the bait and into the water faster, sharpening the scent plume so it spreads sooner and reaches farther. Blood meal and a touch of salt, and the caller calls a little louder. It is a 10-cent addition, and it is the finish Harold was sure did not exist. That is the $2 caller. Blood meal, amino acids, an Auburn lab, an old tackle mender's tin, and a catfish that has been reading the water this way since long before any of us. Out here in Lancaster County, the rain just started, and I've got a line to check before dark. I'll see you when I see you.